Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Marlowe, and this is my fifth time recording this because of glitches. Um, and I'll be talking to you about the metabolic poison cyanide, which is a rising chemical threat due to its ability to be obtained in mass and easily deployed to cause mass panic. I'm going to be touching on a few key points in this article. First off, what is cyanide? The history of cyanide, some mechanisms of cyanide, the signs and symptoms of the poisoning, its treatment, and then I'm going to conclude. So, what is cyanide exactly? Well, there are a few answers to this question. Cyanide by itself exists as a carbon and nitrogen atom that is triple bonded together. It maintains a negative charge, so it attracts positively charged ions to itself when in the body, and um, it comes in usually three forms. The first one is hydrogen cyanide, which is right here and here. This is a clear, colorless liquid that is volatile and can be dispersed through um, gases, bombs, so on and so forth, and inhaled by its victims following a different pathway than the other two forms, which are potassium cyanide and sodium cyanide, here and here, which both are this white powder type stuff. You see it instead of cyanide pills. You see it in food poisoning, water poisoning, so on and so forth. And its mechanism of action is through ingestion. A little bit about its history. Cyanide was isolated in Sweden in 1782 by Carl Scheele, and it is believed that its exposure led him to an early grave. He was actually one of only 40% of the population that can smell hydrogen cyanide, which is described as a bitter almond smell. And there are many noteworthy historical uses of cyanide. Just a few. Nazis used cyanide in concentration camps during World War II, where they killed millions of people using a cyanide-based pesticide. Uh, Things like plastics, nylon, and polyurethanes, when burned, can release cyanide. Therefore, in 2009, a Russian nightclub fire killed over 150 people due to the inhalation of cyanide, which was produced by burning those plastics. Um, you see, cyanide perfectly fits the description of an ideal terrorist weapon. It's easy to acquire in mass, does not require much knowledge to use, is capable of causing mass panic and social disruption, and on top of this, the resources needed to combat it are enormous and impractical. An example of this was when the Kurdish Workers' Party poisoned the water tanks in a Turkish Air Force base with lethal levels of potassium cyanide. Some stories are as tame as a woman who ate 28 apricot kernels along with peach and apple seeds and ended up with cyanide poisoning due to a compound called amygdalin, which contains cyanide. Luckily, she made a full recovery, and it is not yet known how many apricot kernels you have to eat to actually kill yourself. Luckily. But I'm sure that would be very uncomfortable. Mechanisms of cyanide. You see, hydrogen cyanide is usually found in gas or liquid form, but most of the time it is inhaled into the body. And while in this form, the cyanide easily crosses the cell membranes and inhibits enzymes. One of the most noteworthy enzyme is the complex 4 here, where it comes in and inhibits it by outcompeting oxygen and due to its high affinity for ferric iron. And it prevents the electron transport chain from functioning, and therefore aerobic respiration can no longer continue. The other way that cyanide poisons you is through ingestion of either sodium cyanide or potassium cyanide, where it makes its way down into your stomach, where it is disassociated from its metal group, its potassium and sodium group, and therefore a hydrogen ion is able to slap itself on there. And then once again, it easily crosses the cell membrane and inhibits complex 4, causing a lack of aerobic metabolism, causing you to asphyxiate. Some signs and symptoms of oral cyanide are inhaled cyanide, Some signs and symptoms of oral cyanide and inhaled cyanide are similar in most ways, except for the timing and severity of the events. When inhaled, symptoms present almost immediately. However, when it is ingested, it may take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours to start eliciting symptoms. With small enough doses of cyanide, usually no signs show up, but with low dose exposure, you may get headaches, confusion, cramping of the abdomen, nausea, vomiting, and dizziness. With large doses, respiratory depression, apnea, arrhythmias, comas, seizures, and hypotension. Within minutes of these symptoms, the victim may sustain irreversible injuries and death. That is minutes. You have minutes to cure them. Common signs of cyanide poisoning are elevated blood lactate, high venous oxygen levels due to oxygen in the body no longer being used. Patient could also have an anion gap and decreased arterial oxygen levels. And though not all these symptoms are specific to cyanide poisoning, it is essential to see how the combination of these symptoms may point to it. Treatment usually includes supportive care and intravenous or intraosseous antidotes. It's effective in large-scale exposures. However, obtaining venous or osseous access is time-consuming and resource-intensive. Research is currently being done into obtaining a perfect antidote for mass casualty situations, along with identifying an easier way to identifying cyanide poisoning in an emergent situation. You see, the perfect antidote is something that has a known mechanism of action, affects the toxicodynamics of cyanide, and will reliably work to produce rapid results and be safe in administering to people that don't have cyanide poisoning, because in a mass casualty situation, you're just going to want to treat everybody immediately instead of waiting to see what happens. Due to the threat of cyanide being used in terrorism on a mass scale, since it is easily obtained, it is hoped that the ease of administration be simple enough for anybody to use. Emergency workers, maybe management, ground safeties, people that can be in there to just administer it, kind of like an EpiPen for an allergic reaction, but a bit more severe. Rapid diagnostic tests will speed up treatment delivery and can have tremendous impact on mass casualty in limited resource situations once developed. And supportive care following cyanide consumptions involves the administration of 100% oxygen, followed by activated charcoal, gastric lavage, and intravenous antidotes. Note that these methods are not ideal for your mass casualty situations out on the field. And currently, FDA-approved treatments fall into 3 general classes, one being nitric oxide donors, sulfur donors, and direct binding agents. All 3 of these antidotes require extensive volume, intravenous administration, and have stability issues and adverse effects like transient hypertension, allergic reactions, red discoloration of the skin and urine, and hypotension. In conclusion, cyanide is a deadly toxin that is easy to obtain in mass, making it ideal for terrorists to use. While many cyanide deaths are self-inflicted, cyanide remains a high-risk chemical threat agent. Therefore, to safeguard against such threats, it is essential to prioritize the development of easily administered and highly effective antidotes for oral cyanide that can be used in mass casualty situations. So here's my references, formatted in APA format. Thank you all for listening. I look forward to the next semester.